Real women.
Real talk.
Real messy.
This is Messy Midlife.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Messy Midlife. We are certain of what we're talking about today, ladies, because we just finished chatting about our last episode. We just finished recording our last episode about my journey with endometriosis, which was not what we were intending to talk about. And that we knew we needed to follow up on the conversation we had about rage, which I did mention. And we ended that episode with the rage building. And I feel like I have a better understanding through conversations with both of you guys about rage than I had at the end of our conversation, where we were agreeing to disagree about the idea of rage and its sacredness and its value in life in general, but especially in perimenopause. So let's talk about rage, because I feel it a little bit more right now. I would not have called this rage before, but I see it more now that might be what it is. So let's dive in.
So I want to share the Women's Purpose Community Retreat that I went to. I think is why we started talking about all of this in that last episode. And I wanted to share what Jessica, the founder, shared just shortly. And it's looking at that sacred feminine rage, right? And we were talking a lot about balancing the feminine and masculine. So I just wanted to kind of set this because I think it's important to understand that. So when we're talking about sacred rage and emotional alchemy, she says the feminine essence is expression, feeling, truth, and release. And the masculine counterpart is grounding, containment, and direction. So I thought that's interesting in terms of how we think about rage. It's not necessarily, well, I'm so pissed off about this. It's like, this is the truth and I'm expressing what I'm feeling. And I think that's what gets pushed down a lot.
I'm feeling a little bit of rage. I'm going to be perfectly honest about the fact that we have to identify something as masculine or feminine. Why can't it just be human?
Because those aren't necessarily the energies in the world. I think it's not necessarily like, it's not male versus female or female versus male. It's the masculine and the feminine that we each embody in all of us, but finding that balance.
I think we need to change it to completely new words so that it's not associated with having a penis or a vagina in any ways of people's mind. Instead of calling it the masculine and feminine energy, I think we need to call it the blurg energy and the blop energy, and just leave it at that. There's the blurg and the blop. We have to have a balance of both as a human, and that, because I don't know, I got a little bit pissed off about, oh, the masculine energy is what gives us direction and groundedness. Like, no,
Well, they both
just that
exist.
a little bit.
They
Or a
both
lot.
exist in all humans.
Which is why I just don't, like, for some reason in my brain, I need it to be separate. I need it to not be identified as masculine or feminine because of the way that society has shifted those things. But I'm getting off topic, and I'm creating a completely different podcast than was intended for the conversation today. And I will try not to derail us completely. But I just think we should call it something different.
Well, we can work on that. One of the things I wanted to share with you guys that I had written down too when I did this, when I did these exercises at the retreat was, how can I channel my rage into power? Which I think is an interesting way to frame it, right? And again, part of what came up in this retreat was, your rage is a sacred messenger. Jessica says it's not random, it's not shameful. It's a signal pointing to where your boundaries have been crossed. For me, it was where my truth was silenced, where I silenced my truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's lots of different ways to think about it. And yeah, it can feel uncomfortable if we're going to talk about masculine, feminine, and male and female. I think sometimes for women, it can feel really uncomfortable to express that because in the patriarchal society we live in, we're told that we shouldn't feel that. And I think that's a big problem. But it's like feeling that and connecting to it and being truthful about it is how we're able to express ourselves and really say what we're feeling without trying to tiptoe or walk on eggshells. Because I think that, I can't speak for everybody. I think a lot of women do it. I know I certainly do, is I tiptoe around it because I don't want to cause upset and I don't want to cause a fight. right? And I did that for a long time of kind of tiptoeing around what I truly felt when some of what I was feeling was truly rage. But I would, frame it with, I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm not saying this to cause a fight, right? I had to put these qualifiers on it in order for me to express how I was feeling. And that's bullshit.
Yeah. We cannot be good girls if we are angry. That was certainly the message I received, and a very patriarchal message of you must be polite and quiet, and anything that you feel needs to be filtered through the good girl filter.
Yeah, you have to hide it because if you don't hide it, you're not lovable, right?
So I think where my disconnect was like rage being something that is directed outward versus being directed inward. And that rage can be a follow on expression, if you will, of things like depression and anxiety and just stress and unrealistic expectations and unmet needs and all of those things rather than necessarily being directed outwards. And I think that my hang up is in part because of the specialty and area I focus in with my practice. We have rage filled kids, and rage in kids is externally driven. And I don't know if I just was associating the word rage just means the same thing for everybody. And so rage in a child looks like destruction around the house and punching and kicking and making it somebody else's problem to fix versus rage as a woman in her 40s can just be finally acknowledging all of the stuff that you've never fully acknowledged and being unhappy that you've had to do it for that amount of time. And it's not necessarily that I'm going to start throwing things around the house or smacking people, though sometimes I wish we could. Rarely. I don't want to do smack therapy very often, but occasionally. Anyway, recognizing that it's more of a just a bigger expression of other things.
And suppressing it is disconnecting us from what we're really feeling. I think could be said with any emotion, right? Suppressing what we're feeling truly just disconnects us from what it is that we're really feeling and need to explore.
Karen, I'm really curious to hear your response to this thing I'm about to say because of your background in therapy, but both of you, but you particularly with therapy. I have become in the last several years a really firm believer that anger is a secondary emotion. And I know that Brene Brown, if we're doing a drinking game there's a drinking game for if any of us mentions Brene Brown, right? So it's the drinking game. If I get off on a tangent that has nothing to do with the topic, like I'm doing right now, you have to take a drink. And if Karen says messy midlife, you have to take a drink.
Or Brene Brown. Those are my favorites.
If any of us mention Brene Brown, and if Lisa, I don't remember what yours was for
I'll
drinking.
never mention Brene Brown.
You will never
You
mention.
do.
Oh no, but yours, yes, but yours was if you quote something that because you have lots of quotes. It may not be Brene Brown, but you got lots of other quotes. Anyway, back to so go ahead. You get 2 drinks now, one for me and one for mentioning Brene Brown. So Brene Brown, in one of her more recent books or podcasts or something, she did say that she's found that anger is a primary emotion. I still have a hard time connecting with it as a primary emotion. I'm curious what your thoughts are, Karen, because I feel like every time I have felt anger, every time I have experienced anger with somebody else, it is secondary to a primary emotion not being met.
Yeah, I think that is oftentimes the case. And my experience as well is usually as a secondary emotion. One of the best ways I think to understand anger as a primary emotion is imagining somebody hurting your child. It's instant
Yeah.
anger. And then it fuels a power of retaliation, protection, whatever. And so I think that's a really good example of how anger can be primary, but it is so frequently secondary, for sure.
Does anger, as I'm thinking through this and your example is a very good, very concrete example for me of when I would not necessarily, although fear would still be involved probably if somebody was hurting my child, potentially, depending on who was doing the hurting, but maybe I could see something that was just anger with nothing else associated with it. But I think about the movie Inside Out and how there's inside out and inside out 2, and inside out 2 is when we get the sort of more nuanced secondary emotions that come into play. And so it's not fear, but it's anxiety, and it's, not sadness, but ennui. And anger was a primary emotion, and children definitely have anger that has nothing to do with fear or sadness. Though I still would say many of the times that anger can be still connected to those things in children. Uh, but I'm wondering if it's as we just develop a better understanding of the world and ourselves and our emotions that anger tends to fade away as a primary, unconnected to anything else emotion, and comes on as a result of not tending to the others.
And I think the opposite can be true as well, where if I'm certainly in
Mm.
my example, right, where I'm a child not allowed to experience anger, sadness became my secondary emotion because I was not able to process and be true to my anger
Do
as
you
a
th-
primary.
do you think anger to be a primary emotion has to have helplessness?
Say more about that.
So the examples that we've given with a child who is not allowed to do something, or not allowed to feel something, or doesn't connect with something, they have helplessness. They can't do the things for themselves. And so they have anger because they're not getting a thing that they just really want to do. They really want to explore. They're being blocked. And it's not about fear. It's not about sadness. They just want to be able to do this, and they're not allowed to do it. And they're angry. Or you're angry because somebody has hurt your child and you had a helplessness that you couldn't intervene to stop it. Or the anger, the rage I was starting to feel at the end of our last conversation, where it was coming up because of all of the ways that the system is set up for women in general, for women's health needs, that we're set up to fail. And that no matter what we did, no matter what I would have done in the situation with my endometriosis and how it came about, I could not have intervened to control it, and there were places that other people should have had an opportunity to give me different advice. And so is anger does anger require a certain amount of helplessness, or feelings of helplessness, or feelings of, I don't know, control?
It's very mobilizing, right? Anger is naturally a mobilizing energy and emotion. So it would make sense that it would be an antidote to helplessness. And I think it stems from a suppression of authenticity. It stems from a suppression of self expression and the need to be true to yourself, which is why it's so critical for us at this stage of our lives where we're saying, that's it. I'm coming out. This is it. This is who I am. I'm not going to be silenced any longer.
Do you think that rage is a just natural and or necessary aspect of midlife, as we are coming up against these various different things, the things that we can't control, the things that we feel like we have been forced to suppress, that we have bought into and suppressed for ourselves? Is it a natural, necessary thing that, regardless of what was happening in society, would happen because of the changes that we're experiencing internally? Or is this something that, for instance, Gen Z, we're all Xennials, right? We're either baby Gen Xers or elder millennials. And so we're the Xennial group here, and we're on the verge of how we were raised, of feelings being okay, but still not really okay. And the Gen Z group that are feeling all their feelings on a regular basis, do you think they're still going to have rage when they go through midlife? Or do you think that because of being allowed to feel their feelings and not having the forced societal or personal pressures to suppress things, that maybe they won't feel rage?
I hope they do. And I think that they will, especially female midlifers, Gen Z midlifers, because I think that's going to move the needle even more. I think every time a woman goes through perimenopause, we evolve as a species. I really do. And so I hope that I know there's a lot of, feelings about Gen Z's feelings, but I think that when they get to that stage, I hope that, the flexibility and space that they have been awarded will lead to us being able to evolve even further. So that's my take on it. Eliza, I saw you laughing, smirking.
I mean, I think it's a totally different world for someone in their 20s now or early 20s now than it was for us in our early 20s.
Hmm.
I think there is an insane amount to be angry about right now that we're all angry about, and I know younger generations are too.
Mhm.
And I think there are more opportunities for people to express that anger now as well. Like I mean, Jen, you said, is it like important for women in midlife? I think it's important for women at every age to be able to learn how to express rage appropriately and safely. I don't think we're taught that. I wasn't taught that as a kid, I was never taught that.
Yeah. I'm aware that as I was saying, are they gonna experience less rage when they're in midlife? Part of it is just hoping that they have more peace through the process of midlife, honestly, hoping that they don't have to have the upheavals that we're learning are associated and that are clearly happening on a large scale in midlife. And I also realized that that was kind of a Gen X thing to say. Like maybe, who knows, maybe they'll have more rage because it's maybe we're not even having as much rage as we really could possibly have because we're still so used to suppressing it. And so maybe it'll be the opposite. And maybe they'll have more rage. And maybe rage, as you guys are trying to tell me, that rage is a vital thing rather than something to set aside or to try to avoid or try to not experience.
My hope is that our generation is paving the way for a lot more open conversations and education and knowledge about what perimenopause and menopause and midlife look like, because
Mhm.
it's certainly never something that anyone ever talked to us about or put out there, right? It was like men having their midlife crisis and buying a sports car and having a mistress, right? That was what I learned midlife was when I was
Mhm.
younger. There
Mhm.
was never anything from a woman's perspective about having kids or not having kids and doing everything and being in a relationship or not, but having like the weight of the world on your shoulders and being the one who takes care of everything. And in a family structure, like being the center and the foundation of every family, you
Mhm.
know? And I don't know. I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit before, but it's like, I see how comfortable my daughter is with rage and anger. And while I don't think it's always expressed correctly, or like, I shouldn't say correctly, there's no right and wrong, but I don't think it's expressed in a healthy way for her sometimes. And sometimes I do. Like, I'm really actually in awe of that. Like, she told me she had a teacher that was saying it doesn't matter what the situation is, you should like never hit another person. Or and my daughter was like, what about if someone's attacking you or assaulting you? You should
Mhm.
hit them. You
Mhm.
should fight as much as you can. And her teacher was like, no, no, that's not. And she said, yes, it is. Are you telling me that if somebody attacks me, I'm not supposed to fight back? And I was like, this was like my mother of the year moment, right? Where I was like, I'm so proud of you for saying this. Like, that's
Mhm.
huge. And that
Mhm.
was 100% correct and right for her to say.
Mhm.
So I don't know. It's such a broad spectrum to talk about, but I do think our generation, I can't speak to others, right? But I know for sure that all of my friends and all of us, like, it was never even talked about. Like, this is a healthy way to express anger. This is a healthy way to express to you, to yourself or to other people, what is upsetting you. It
I
was
think it's
just,
not just
don't be
anger
angry.
though, right? And this is for sort of where I got caught up last time is the more I'm expressing anything that I am feeling, expressing it to myself and acknowledging it and accepting it to myself, or discussing and acknowledging it to the person that is associated with it or whatever is happening that is connected to the emotional response that I'm having, the more I'm able to talk about it, the less I'm getting to the point of rage. And I think this is where I get hung up sometimes is that I think that there are healthy ways that rage shows up and ways that rage is very productive. And I think that if we focus only on rage, that we're missing opportunities to talk about the healthy ways that all emotions are expressed and that rage does not have to always be the outcome for the emotion to have validity and to get the opportunity to be expressed.
Absolutely. But it can be one way that it is. I totally agree with you. It's being able to express any of our emotions freely, right? I mean, I think Karen, you and I have that in common. Like emotions were not welcome. And that's one of the things that I tell my daughter now, right? All of your emotions are valid and they are all welcome. All behaviors are not, but
Mhm.
all of your emotions are. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of people have, is delineating between an emotion and the behavior that can come from that. Kids and adults, they're two separate things. Yes, one might lead to another, but you can have an emotion, a very strong emotion, without engaging in kind of a negative behavior because of that.
Part of me feels like rage and anger is so outward and so big that it requires attention. And so it becomes a safer, easier place to land when you're talking about expressing emotions. And that's part of the reason why I think so many girls get missed with mental health diagnoses, with ADHD, et cetera, because rage, we go back to the masculine and feminine, or the blurg and the blop, that, rage is so much easier for boys, so much more tolerated, so much more accepted. And so they get the attention for what they need. And in some cases not, because sometimes it's seen as a rage filled boy when it was really a sad boy because it's a secondary emotion. But the more that we can all easily and safely talk about all of the emotions that we're having, the better we will do as a whole, because the anxiety, the fear, the sadness, the disconnection, the loneliness, all of these things that build up to rage deserve their attention, but they don't feel as fiery, as powerful, as action oriented as rage does. Still, I guess I'm still landing in the same place. Yes, there's value to rage. Yes, especially when there's something that like you are truly disenfranchised with. And all of our emotions are valuable. All of our emotions are welcome. And we can be sad and anxious when we're disenfranchised too. And I don't really feel like I'm landing on something really solid right now, other than to acknowledge to me and to anybody else who was like me and struggling with some of this, that all of the spectrum is important to be considered sacred, I guess maybe is really where it comes down to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't look, we're talking about rage, which is one thing, but it does not exist in a bubble
Mhm.
at all. So it's goes along with so many other things. And I think even when it's being talked about and how to express it, again, it's not just in the bubble of just rage. There's so many other things that are a part of that too. So we're talking about it in our little microcosm here, but it's not how it exists.
Well, and I'm sure we're going to have this come up lots and lots of other times. I do know that we need to wrap for today. So I appreciate you both in the conversations that we've had between chats that we put out to the world, and in this conversation that we've had today, to help bring some of it a little bit more together for me and for anybody else who needs to hear all of the ways that it's important to recognize our emotions and rage and the blurg and the blop of things, or the masculine and feminine, if that doesn't make you fill with rage like it does me. We'll land there, I think, for today. And it's lovely, as always, to see both of you. And I love you so much. And I love everybody who is willing to give us a little bit of their time. And we can't wait to hear more about what you guys want to talk about, what you would bring up that's on your mind if you were to join us for these little chats that we have together.
Yes.
All right.
Bye, guys.
We love you.
Bye, ladies.
If our messy is your kind of messy, we'd love for you to rate, review, and follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We'd also love to know what's on your mind. If you were to join us, what would we be talking about? Email us at messymidlifepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Instagram or TikTok.